Hi everyone, I'm Neil Harding and welcome to Property Insight.
Hi, I'm Mark Ashworth.
Today we're going to talk about HMO and council tax. So we've done a video separately about what tenants typically pay for and what bills landlords typically pay for. So do check that out, and we've gone through all sorts of different types of bills. But today we're going to specifically talk about council tax because there's been an update in the news recently about the government's intention on that. Now, just to start us off, so ordinarily on a single let, the council tax would be paid for by the tenant. With an HMO, and I don't have any HMOs, Mark, you do, so you're our resident expert here on HMOs, but HMOs can work differently. So Mark, what's the situation with HMOs?
So with a HMO, typically all bills are included. So people will share the property, they will pay the landlord a rent, and the landlord's responsible for paying the council tax and all the other bills, energy bills, Wi-Fi, all that sort of stuff. I mean, obviously each landlord is different and set up differently. So in some HMO rooms, depending on how they're organised, they will have, each room may have an electricity meter where they pay their own electricity. That's in some HMOs, that's how it works. But generally speaking, certainly in the properties that I have, which are let to professionals, they will have all bills included, which includes the council tax. So the bill comes through to the landlord and he pays the bill, so it's in the landlord's name. When you have a single let property, it's the responsibility of the legal occupier to pay the council tax. So in a scenario where up and down the country there have been some council areas with HMOs, and particularly those that are, let's say, slightly self-contained, so they may have an ensuite in the room, they have been started to ban these for individual council tax. Now the issue here is that because it's no longer the responsibility of the landlord, it is then down to the tenant to pay the council tax, which means they are legally responsible as the legal occupier with an AST for that particular room. Now obviously you can imagine how complicated this can get then, particularly when people in HMO rooms don't stay as long as they do in normal
Family
properties.
Or something.
Yeah. But the issue here is an affordability one, right? Because the whole purpose of you renting a HMO room is potentially from an affordability perspective. So now you're having to pay the room, but the landlord is not responsible for the council tax. So the landlord can't pay the council tax. The tenant has to pay. It's in their name. It has to be in their name. And if they don't pay it, they're the ones that are liable, not the landlord. So you can imagine that property managers, investors, owners and landlords up and down the country have been, from an administration point of view alone, is just an absolute nightmare. And also where tenancies have existed in HMOs and then all of a sudden they have to pay, but the landlord can't cover the cost. Well, I guess they could cover the cost by reducing the rent by whatever the council tax is, but the tenant is legally liable to pay for the council tax in their name. So this new legislation or this new rule has now come out not so long ago, that they've now abolished the idea of having individual council tax bandings for HMO properties. Thankfully, they've seen sense and realised that it's just not practical, administrative nightmare, and essentially not really very fair, because if you've got one property that pays council tax and there's a number of people in that house banded correctly for council tax in the first place, it's almost like a poll tax for HMOs, isn't it? You know, just a completely unfair tax in my mind.
So the government's announced that they're going to change the law, and this.
Well, I don't ever think there was a law.
Room assessment.
I don't think there was law.
So
I think
it might just be clarification.
So it was down to the valuation, so not the council, the valuation office. And I think the council, typically local councils, not really speaking or communicating correctly with the valuation office. I don't believe that the two are, well, on the same wavelength, shall we say. And so I think it was some disparity between the valuation office and also the local councils as to why this came about. I don't know an awful lot about the ruling where in council areas where they enforced the individual council tax banning on HMO rooms, because I wasn't part of it. I guess there's lots of stuff online that you can research on that. But they've basically announced that it's unfair, and and it's not going to, or they'll redact what they've already done, and moving forward, if you live in a shared accommodation, then you'll always pay that one fee to the landlord, and the landlord's responsible for the council tax for the whole property as one unit.
So this is significant news for any HMO landlord then, isn't it? Because, I mean, for me, actually, one of the reasons why I never wanted to get into an HMO market is this risk that was hanging over the HMO model, that there's always the possibility that the local valuation office comes along and says, we're going to assess you for council tax on 5 rooms of a 5-bed HMO, and let's say the council tax for the whole property might have originally been assessed at, what, I'll just make some numbers up, £100 a month or something maybe for council tax for a property, and then suddenly that's 5x, and then suddenly it's £500 a month and that probably kills the profit on at least one of your rental rooms in that HMO, or might half the profit per month on your let.
It barely makes it viable. And so what's going to happen, you know, the same old thing of like, okay, well, if it's not financially viable, then it doesn't exist anymore. So then you've got a whole load of people that rent HMO rooms that then can't rent property anymore. So again, taking out rental units in the private rented sector. And, you know, look, at the end of the day, in all cities and towns, small towns, big towns, particularly places like Cambridge, we're very close geographically to Cambridge. Both of us live very near Cambridge. As one of the most expensive areas in the country, there are many people, many professionals that want to live in shared accommodation because A, the cost, B, the fact that they get to share the property with other humans, meaning that they can have some social interaction at home as opposed to living on their own. There's a number of reasons why people rent in HMO rooms. But obviously one of them is a cost issue. And sometimes in Cambridge now, I think, for the most part, a high quality HMO room will cost you as much as it would to rent a flat in other towns. So, you know, it's very affordable to do that. And so therefore, if you're living in one property, it should surely only be fair that you pay one council tax for the property and for the services that are there. I think at the end of the day, some of the councils might have seen that there was some kind of loophole or some kind of way of making extra revenue, and so, I mean, they all kind of operate independently, don't they? Most of these councils.
I think so, yeah.
Anyway, I think it's a win for tenants. It's certainly a win for landlords, and obviously, if it's a win for landlords, eventually it trickles down to the tenant, I think, and so therefore, you know, tenants are going to be in a better place, and landlords can be more secure and in the knowledge that you know, councils are treating this tax as fairly as it can be.
Really good update. So I think one thing to bear in mind is that it's still a bit of a moving target. Keep your eye on the news and to see exactly what the final details of that are, but really interesting news for HMO landlords and for tenants. Okay, so really hope that that's been insightful as always, and see you next time. Thank you.